Hello everybody, welcome to the SmartCom Summit 2020. And when I mention 2020, I do realize we're only halfway through this year, but can you remember January of 2020? What has changed since January? I think it's safe to say our lives, our business, our world changed dramatically. And I also think it's safe to say that we're pretty sure that offices and work will never be the same. Transportation will never be the same. Healthcare, entertainment and dating, healthcare, all these things will change. And every single time I use the word never the same, I also realize that's a business opportunity. That's a challenge. That's something we can take advantage of. And it's not only these developments in our society, but it's also technology as the big accelerator in this rapid change, this revolution. There's only one big risk. Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, once said, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it's to act with yesterday's logic." And I think Peter Drucker was right. Let me take you briefly through the program for this show. We'll talk about a number of subjects: broadband, smart everything, work anywhere, cloud and APIs, and CPaaS, which is communication platform as a service. Those are the subjects we will talk about with a number of guests. But first I want to introduce to you the guy who's really the big guy behind this whole program, Rob Curver. Truly a revolution, right, what we're talking about here. It's more than turbulence.
Thanks, Charles. Yes, I think it's more than turbulence. It's really a transformation. I mean, we're living the biggest experiment ever, basically, right? A couple months ago, the whole world started to lock down, and we all decided to go home and to continue our lives as the best way we could, using digital technology, digital infrastructure, and in many parts of the world that worked remarkably well. And in many parts of the world it doesn't. And even the parts where it's going well, there's still a lot of challenges. Because what we're sort of doing right now is we're copying the office and the world that we knew onto a digital pane. And that's of course not where we want to end up. Speaking with Drucker, the big question now is not how do we copy the old world into a digital world, but how do we take it to the next level? Where are we going to go? And I think that's very exciting for especially the people that we have here today who are in this industry. It's very exciting to be part of that. It also gives us a lot of responsibilities as an industry and a lot of opportunities and a lot of, well, basically interesting things, interesting times.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to switch to Mark Winter, who is joining us from New York City. Hello, Mark, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you.
Hey there, good to have you on the show. What's your perspective on this, I would say, heavy turbulence and probably a revolution we'll talk about even 10 years from now?
Yeah, well, I think that is the right way to think about it. We have defined a series of 5 stages on the road to recovery for enterprises and organizations, how to move from this crisis stage that we're kind of a little bit past now, but we have several stages to go through. And the key question for enterprises, CEOs, is do they follow the same course as previous recessions, which was basically a cost-cutting course, or do they find ways to leverage technology and flatten the curve, meaning not drop so far down as a result of the crisis, but use technology, build business resiliency, and flatten that curve and create a future enterprise that is anti-seismic in the sense it's more agile, more adaptable, and will not be as badly affected by crises like the one we're living through now. So that's the key challenge. And then just to put another perspective on it, the joke we make is, who is driving digital transformation in your organization? Is it the CEO? Is it the CTO? Or is it COVID-19?
What do you think? What do you think, Mark? Who's going to drive that change?
Our thinking right now is that COVID-19 is definitely accelerating digital initiatives. Clearly, there are some pauses as companies think about, their costs and their procurements. But we see a lot of cases where we're doing in a 30 days what had been planned for a 2 or 3 year initiative.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll switch to Patrick. Patrick, can you hear us?
I can hear you great.
Hey there, you're joining us from Washington, D.C., right?
Yes, I'm in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yep.
And I just quoted Peter Drucker, he said, take advantage of this turbulence, take advantage of this revolution or crisis or whatever you want to call it. Do you agree with Peter Drucker?
Absolutely. I think this is a really, as Mark just said, a kind of an unprecedented situation. We're seeing transformation happening much more quickly than ever before. And I think a lot of the investments that the telecom carriers have done in the past are really starting to pay off. Move to virtualized software and cloud-centric kind of services. That really left us pretty well equipped to be able to quickly adapt and have people work from home and be able to really work from anywhere, which I think is really what's going to be happening going forward. I don't imagine, when we talk about the new normal, that we're ever going to be working in the same kind of way that we've had in the past.
Yeah. And what would you say? I mean, everybody's talking about this new normal. Will it eventually, in your view, be a better normal with all the crises we have and people going through a lot of misery? You have to acknowledge that, of course. But eventually, we'll pass this crisis. Will that be a better normal, you think?
My perspective is different. I don't know that I would call it better or worse, right? It's just not going to be the same the way it had been before. One of the terms that we use all the time is now social distancing. But just the conversation we're having right now via video, we were having a conversation before here. I haven't seen Mark Winter in a long time, lives in New York. I'm in Washington, D.C. But social distancing doesn't mean emotional distancing. And I think the technologies that we've got here with video and collaboration tools proliferating throughout the world have really allowed us to continue to work and to be productive and to maintain relationships. So I think it's different. I will tell you, most of my colleagues are still looking to the time where we can get back on airplanes again and have face-to-face meetings. But it's very uncertain in terms of when that could happen, if ever, in the same way.
Yeah, I'll switch to the people here in the studio. Edwin, you're with iBasis. What does iBasis do?
In short, iBasis is one of the largest wholesale companies in the world, independent, providing voice services, mobile services, IoT, but also emerging cloud communications, the new phenomenon.
Okay. And in days of Corona, what's your biggest challenge right now, and also your biggest opportunity?
The biggest challenge, what we saw immediately, is that flying almost stopped immediately. And flying impacted directly the roaming traffic. The roaming traffic is impacting your top line revenue. And that is happening worldwide. And that is a significant decline for everybody. At the same time, you see a tremendous increase in data bandwidth, in data communication, in alternative use. You see even now laggards using new technologies. Many people didn't ever use Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatsoever, and they are addicted.
These are household names now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And Susie, you're in HR. Look at it from the HR perspective. We're going to talk about people working from home, etc. But what is the biggest impact on employees and employers in your view?
Yeah. So it's really two things. One, leaders and leadership has to change, because how we led in the past is not the way we're going to have to lead in the future going forward. And two, I think from an employee perspective, I think that there's a lot of fear and angst and anxiety. So what is the role of the corporation to actually reach out and help people still continue to have that sense of purpose and belonging and engagement in companies?
How hard is that for employers?
I think we're getting there. I think it's just a matter of we have to lean in.
There's also this rapid change where things go faster than you could imagine.
You have to lean in. And my experience is leaders are doing a really good job.
Yeah. And employees are getting used to it?
I think at the beginning there was a lot more trepidation. I think employees are also feeling fear of losing their roles, losing their jobs, and change.
And Michiel, from your perspective, what would you say is the biggest opportunity in these days of turbulence?
Currently, you see that digital infrastructure, the digital economy is thriving. It's accelerated by the crisis. The fact that people work from home, learn from home, and entertain themselves from home has accelerated the whole movement and has given opportunity to companies, but also to the government, to deal with the challenges and to deal with the future economy in the future society, how to shape that and how to create a new reality from a government and a public perspective.
And business-wise, I asked Mark, will this new normal eventually be a better normal? What about your business?
Absolutely. We see digitalization is seen as key to future prosperity. Digitized nations such as the Netherlands and other countries who have a head start with the digitalizations have a far more glamorous future. And I think for companies it's now at this stage a possibility to act on that and to define their strategies.
Okay. As I said before, we'll talk about a number of subjects. Let's focus on, let's zoom in. Let's zoom in, right?
Yeah.
On broadband.
So, with digital infrastructure, so important, the question is it good enough? How did we even manage in this crisis, right? Did it work? Did everything work everywhere? Will it be good enough when we go back to work and people start Netflixing again? How is it going to go? And what are the projections for the future? And what needs to be done to make sure that we keep access to this digital infrastructure that we all need?
No. And we have an opinion poll on every subject. We ask the people, wherever you are, to give your opinion about an important question on this specific subject, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for this particular subject, we chose a very easy question. Is it necessary for digital infrastructure to be regulated or even managed or invested in by governments? Or do we leave it to the market?
You can say, no way, government regulation, regulated only or owned and managed by the government.
Maybe the government should invest.
May I have your votes, please?
Yeah, exactly. You can vote online.
And we have an analyst talking about this subject, Tim Paulus, please. Tim.
Yes, hi. Well, I think we can agree that digital infrastructure is enabling all these wonderful things that we do today, and along with device manufacturers, also an important enabler, and let's say apps with all the content, the media behind them. Those are the enablers. But I don't think we need to worry about this, because the crisis has shown that, as some people will say, every day is Sunday today. Every day is Sunday. We're seeing peak traffic levels that we used to see only on Sundays, when people were watching live sports, doing Netflix, and we see it every day. So there's no real reason to worry, because networks are coping. And I think that's also something that you see over the past few years, where operators have been used to staying ahead of demand. And if you look at numbers, download speeds and availability of networks, again, they are coping. They're coping very well in creating the next technology for the future, and staying ahead of demand, and making sure that networks don't crash and stay up. And who would have thought in the early days of fiber to the home, let's say, as sort of the ultimate technology, that cable networks would be coping after so many years, and they do. In the Netherlands, 50% of households are on cable networks, and they're satisfied about it. There's no problem here. So even cable networks, if I may put it like that, are able to cope.
Yeah, thank you. I want to switch to Patrick. Patrick, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. What would be, if you think about broadband and 5G coming up, what would be, in your view, the biggest business opportunity in the next couple of years, given all the developments we see around us here?
Well, I agree 100% that the carriers have done a really good job in terms of coping with the spike in demand right now. But I fear that they can't be complacent in terms of assuming that the infrastructure they have now is sufficient for future demand. If anything, we see this working from home and working from anywhere kind of phenomenon really driving incredible amounts of bandwidth requirements. As we start looking at making sure that applications are available from the cloud and the cloud be accessed everywhere, there's a tremendous opportunity for carriers to be investing right now in low latency services which requiring a much greater bandwidth in terms of mid-haul and backhaul than they've got in their network. When we've got 5G, when 5G is truly available, I think we're really going to see different services that we never even envisioned before. I was on a panel on Internet of Things not too long ago, and they were talking about farming in Latin America. And one of the things that they talked about is if they have 5G available, then they're really able to have these smart devices on farming equipment to make sure that they're monitoring the effectiveness of the fertilizer that they're putting into the ground, the seeds that they're actually planting to make sure they get the optimal yield. So I think we're going to see the requirements for information real-time, accessible on a 5G network for applications that we've not even thought of right now.
Yeah. What about you, Edwin? I mean, working in telecom and 5G and more broadband, I mean, that's paradise for companies like yours, right?
It is paradise. At the same time, you need to realize that let's say, if you see the development of these services, it's different everywhere. In Europe, we have a luxury situation because
great infrastructure.
We have a great infrastructure, we have the money, we have the capacities, and I think everything is aligned. Look at Roam Like Home. It was not an initiative from a national operator, it was the EU who stepped in. Let's say, so there is a big opportunity. On the other hand, also look at countries like, for instance, America, where accessibility of even 3, 4 or 5G, still the majority lives on 2G. Mm-hmm. So the chain is as strong as the weakest spot in that chain. So we talk about the luxury situation as you sit over here, but it is not accessible for everybody.
You seem to agree, Patrick?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think that there's still a fair amount of infrastructure that needs to get developed. Now, the advantage is it's somewhat flexible in terms of being able to add capacity because, again, most of the critical infrastructure is really software-based, it's been virtualized, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to invest in it. It doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of parts of the, like, for example, as Edwin mentioned, part of the country here that really doesn't have broadband coverage at all.
Yeah. What do you think, Michael? Where would the investment have to come from? I mean, you're talking about either government, public money, or a private money, or a combination of both. Where do you see the money coming from?
Well, from a public perspective, there's two things that really need to change, that we need to act on to safeguard our future. First of all, we need to change the definition of what digital infrastructure really is. That used to be a synonym for telecoms. So we focus on 5G, on the mobile networks, and all the rest that was behind it was sort of automatically taken care of by those companies. That's no longer the case. We need to look at data centers, to look at internet exchange points. We need to look at subsea cable intercontinental. We need to look at infrastructure clouds. Those are all the digital infrastructure, not just for telecom, but for the digital society. And the second one is that we need not just to look at market or government. The question, is it market or is it government? It's going to be both. That means
public-private partnerships.
Absolute PPS. The market needs to do its job, but the government has to take away all the inhibitors and the things that the market can no longer do on its own strength.
Is the market ready for this change, Tim?
I wouldn't worry at all. I
Okay.
mean, as I said earlier, there's just no question about it. There's one thing about 5G that you might worry about, but other than that, if you talk about data traffic increasing by 40% every year, it's no problem. And operators know this, they don't need the government, at least not in, let's say, the Free West. And sometimes the market fails, as they put it, okay, and then the government steps in Germany, in the States also, where they provide some grants for small operators to provide rural coverage, okay, but leave that alone. The one challenge I think there is exactly what our speaker from the States just said, is that we don't always know what 5G is going to do. And if we do, we don't see a business case sometimes. Now, in those cases, operators will be reluctant to invest in their networks, and that's a problem.
Like,
for example, you have the whole internet. It really works because of intercontinental connections, subsea cables. And in the old days, subsea cable investments were done by the telcos. That's no longer the case. It's now Facebook and Google who invest in those types of.
That's quite a change.
That's absolutely a change. So that's a game which is no longer accessible for the smaller players, and that's where governments need to step in to prevent that we become completely dependent on the big players, that we keep some of our digital sovereignty, and that investments also by the smaller networks are still possible. So I see these public-private partnerships as key to that to the future and to the open character of the internet and the future of standards.
So how do you look at the function of telcos in this whole transition in the next couple of years? I mean, it's changing, that's for sure. But what's left for the telcos?
The basic telcos, they need to focus either on capacity expansion, bandwidth expansion, and focus upon that. I think for KPN it's clear, it's 5G, it's fiber. But it creates a big opportunity for, let's say, the new businesses as such, where they cannot spend a lot of efforts and money on that. At KPN in the past, they could do that, but they can't do it now. So you see parties like Enable You, Rapid API, all these parties are stepping into a segment to fill in a gap which is essential, which has been accelerated due to COVID. Had the app to see where we are, who is healthy, yeah, how quickly was that developed? In the Netherlands, it's still not there. In Singapore, it's there.
Yeah. How do you see the business develop when it comes to the role of telcos and private companies in the Big Five, Patrick?
Well, I tell you, I think that telcos really have a big influence in terms of really what's going to be happening going forward. The one thing that I think that they can bring to the table is an understanding of security, because that is something that's absolutely paramount of importance as we start having more cloud-based apps, having a lot of different points of contact where bad actors can intrude into the network. So that's one place where I really look to, again, we've been talking about investment in terms of what's going to be happening with broadband infrastructure. I think security with the ransomware attacks, with the kind of Zoom bombing that you've seen and at the edge of the network, I think carriers are uniquely qualified to start plugging those holes.
Yeah, and let's talk about business opportunities. Let me start with you, Patrick, and I make a little round around the table here. If you had to put some spare money in a certain application or company, what would you recommend going forward to the next couple of years?
Well, I'm very high on our last topic today, CPaaS, right? I think that there's just a tremendous opportunity of different kind of applications that can support a lot of different kind of market verticals. And carriers are uniquely qualified to help get into that space, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later.
Give me one example.
Telemedicine. I think it's a tremendous opportunity right now in terms of being able to really be able to talk to subject matter experts around the world to solve problems without having to travel.
Yeah, and your money goes to Edwin?
Look at one of the other examples. I think if you look at Microsoft Teams and the explosion of Microsoft Teams during COVID, it was fantastic. However, still people looking at the dial path. Where's the dial path? I don't see the dial path. Telegelity stepped into that gap and developed the dial path possibility. I think that's just a simple old and new technique together with, let's say, the old telecom infrastructure, and you connect two things to each other.
So you're talking about the combination of the traditional telco, bandwidth, broadband, with these services on top. Which is similar to what you said. Digital infrastructure is more than just a network layer.
Global connectivity is key.
Right.
Without global connectivity, you don't have the accessibility to all those features. So that remains.
Yeah. Where goes your money?
You shouldn't really ask me too much in technology. To give you an example, Jitse Groen, who is now the richest guy in the Netherlands, he was a trainee in my company. So,
oh, really?
Really? You trained him well.
And I missed blockchain.
If you give us advice, we don't have to follow it. Or just say, if you advise this, we don't do it. But which direction would you think?
I would definitely see communication services. Communication will really thrive, will really grow. E-commerce will continue to grow, and supporting services for e-commerce will be supported. So cloud hosting, software as a service are all areas that will continue to expand over the coming decade.
Yeah. What about you, Tim? Give us a golden tip.
Well, one is easy. Let me first put it like this. If you have to make the choice between networks and services, I would say the choice for services is complicated because it's a jungle and it's completely exploded. All the innovation is happening over the top, mainly in the States, but nobody can really predict what's going to stick and what's not. Services, networks, great business, right? You put €1 into the ground today, you sell it for 2 tomorrow. But the one tip, of course, is, I mean, that's something, well, where I'm coming from, that we used to say to each other, and it's been true for every year since, is buy Amazon shares. It's as simple as that. Amazon is always the best investment. I mean, I've been following this from the point the share price was at $10. That's at $10 20 years ago. There's in the order of 2,000 now, and you know it's an amazing
You should be on
company.
a beach somewhere, right?
It's an
Just
amazing
lay on your back.
I am.
Do you have time to look at the results of the poll? I'm curious. I'm curious what happened.
If I can bring that up.
Or you don't have it on your little screen
Yeah, I should have it here.
somewhere.
I'll try.
Okay, later.
And I've some questions as well. But Amazon, you say?
Always.
Still, I mean, because I mean
Oh, yes.
they've gone up tremendously, of course.
Yes, but same picture last year, same picture 10 years ago, and everybody would say, you know, it's too late, but it's never too late.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see how I can bring up the poll. I'm not sure. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Our digital infrastructure should be regulated or managed by national governments. What do you think? 30% said no way. 47% only regulated and 12% owned and managed by the government. So most people say only regulated. Is that fair?
Okay. I think that's a safe in the middle, but
Safe in the middle.
yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't address your issue about the cross-Atlantic cables, right?
And
I mean,
other,
so we leave that
other
to
issues that we need
Facebook
to
and
collectively resolve. So partial investments is probably what's right, but government owned, I doubt whether that. But anyway, I disagree with that 12%. Absolutely.
Okay. This event is called smart communication, but it's not just communication that gets smarter, it's smart everything.